Emily Tish Sussman is campaign director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund and a Clinton supporter. Thank you all. Like I said, wow, thank God it lived up to expectation, right? I mean, what after all that there was nothing boring in that debate. I mean, look, Emily, I'm going to ask you first. A lot of the polls say that, the majority of the polls say that Hillary Clinton won. She came out on top on that. Does it make any difference? Is it going to move the needle at all for her?
I think it does. And I think that we saw how high the interest was by how many people tuned in last night and how many people are talking about it today. People are very interested and were very serious about watching closely what happened in last night's debate. I think two things happened. I think Clinton was very strong. She was specific. She was clear, she was calm, she showed that she had the temperament and ideas to take on the large issues that the country is facing. I think separately, Trump did not rise to the occasion. I actually thought he would come better prepared for the debate. I thought he would really bring something new. We did not see anything new from him, and it showed that he was very thin-skinned. It was very easy for Clinton to get under his skin.
Betsy, why didn't we see anything new from Donald Trump?
Well, actually, I looked at this debate quite differently, and several of the polls suggest that Trump supporters think he won. And here's why. A lot of Americans looked at this debate as a contest between the blabber and the builder. After all, Hillary Clinton talks for a living, sometimes getting $500,000 at the podium. And she is very practiced at it, and she had maybe 100 carefully scripted, very memorized kinds of answers. She was smooth. But Americans are sick of politicians who just yap, 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 say things, and then don't do anything about it. And Trump really scored big points by reminding the public that that's what politicians do. He said again and again, you've been hearing this from Hillary Clinton for 30 years. She says she has a plan to fix this or that. But why hasn't she done it?
But even if that's true, Ali, did they hear from Donald Trump what he would do in her shoes?
Part of the problem here is that it's very hard on economy, on trade and things like that to evaluate both candidates' proposals because Donald Trump is lacking some specificity. So as he gets a little more specific, it allows economic analysts to take a look at his programs and see what they'll cost. Now, what Hillary Clinton was able to do was to say, for instance, that her plans would add, she didn't really say how much it would add, but we know it would be about $200 billion over 10 years to the deficit. She did point out that Donald Trump's proposals would add about $5.3 trillion to the deficit and take us above that threshold of 100% debt to GDP. Donald Trump needs to stay a little more focused on his economic message and be very specific as to how he'd achieve this 3.5% growth that he said he wants to achieve for the country.
And instead what he did was launch a lot of economic hand grenades, let's call them. Let's listen to one right now where he talked about the U.S. economy and Janet Yellen in particular.
We are in a big, fat, ugly bubble, and we better be awfully careful. And we have a Fed that's doing political things. This Janet Yellen of the Fed is doing political by keeping the interest rates at this level.
Ali, just if you want to bounce off of that right now. I mean, look, Janet Yellen said last week, it's ridiculous. We are not involved in politics.
Right.
And yet, isn't that something that resonates with many people?
It does, and there's a reason why it does, and it should, and that is that it is all, you could look at this as all being one class of people, right? Politicians and the Fed. There's no reality to the idea that the Fed is political or that they are doing things at the behest of the president or a given party. There is truth to the fact that rich people think the way to keep an economy goosed is to keep interest rates low. Now, if you're a regular working person who doesn't get involved in stocks and saves your money, this low interest rate for the last 8 years has been terrible for
Especially
you.
for the elderly.
For the elderly, for instance. Right. So there's a reason why it angers people, but there's no evidence. There have been accusations for decades about how the Fed is a political operation. Everybody in every country thinks their central bank is political. It's not.
Betsy, as a strategy, though, did that work?
I'm not sure it did, but I was a little concerned that the moderator, who was obsessed with fact-checking on things like birtherism, right, or who was against or for the Iraq War a decade ago, didn't focus in on a much more important fact-checking issue, and that is that Mrs. Clinton keeps saying she wants corporations to pay their fair share. And I wish he had asked her, well, Mrs. Clinton, what is the fair share? Corporations in the U.S. pay the highest rates in the world.
I think you're right.
And the
fair share is a hard one to figure out.
I'm going to weigh in here for a second, and then we'll go to another point that...
Yeah, sure, but I think that what we're doing right now is what I think we were afraid was going to happen going into this debate, is holding the two candidates to two very different standards. You yourself just said that what Trump did was that he should stick more to an economic message. He can't get away from things that are personal to him. Most of what he said in the debate last night had to do with his own wealth, promoting his own interests, his own business, and his own personality. And that was the majority of what came out of it.
And more to that point, though, it proved to be an Achilles heel. Betsy, I want everyone here now to listen to Hillary Clinton talking to Donald Trump about his taxes.
Maybe he's not as rich as he says he is. Second, maybe he's not as charitable as he claims to be. Third, we don't know all of his business dealings, but we have been told through investigative reporting that he owes about $650 million to Wall Street and foreign banks. Or maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes.
Boy, that was the kind of suggestion that really needs to be fact-checked. But the fact is, this is very much out of the Democratic Party playbook. Tax shaming, I call it. The fact is that somebody who's a builder like Donald Trump would be very foolish to release his taxes, whether he's under audit or not. And
but does he not get to be the president then? Does he not get to say that my interest?
Let me just finish. The fact is that a builder is very unlikely to pay anything near the top rate, as Ali would say, because of property tax deductions, investment tax credits, depreciation allowances, and yet most politicians do pay the top rate because they have speaking fees, royalties, and a paycheck from the government.
The problem, Betsy, is that right after that clip, Donald Trump got into the mic and said, that's because I'm smart. And I thought at that moment, it's the wrong message to suggest that the 50-some-odd% of Americans who do pay taxes are stupid.
No, he should have said, I would have said, that's because I am fully taking advantage of the deductions that Congress has passed to encourage me to build buildings.
Hence my point. If he would just generally get more specific about the things that he has to say, they'd be less. One would be able to target him a little less, because then you could evaluate, well, is that a truthful statement or not? It is a truthful statement. In other words, Hillary Clinton wants to imply he's doing something wrong by not paying taxes, and what he's saying is, I'm following the law. If you think the law is wrong, you have to change it.
And all of this would be put to rest if he did release them, or gave a reason that he wouldn't. We wouldn't have to have this conversation if he did.
We would spend the rest of this campaign picking apart his tax return instead of focusing on big issues such as what are our tax returns going to look like in 10 years when we can earn more money.
But sometimes in picking through his tax return, you learn what's wrong with the tax code, and people are going to get something from that.
I don't think so. I wish it were that constructive.
Let's give Donald Trump some advice on what he did right in this debate. Perhaps some people thought. Let's take a listen to his comments on trade.
You called it the gold standard. You called it the gold standard of trade deals. You said it's the finest deal you've ever seen.
No.
And then you heard what I said about it, and all of a sudden you were against it.
Emily, this is a real Achilles heel for Hillary Clinton, and even though Trump didn't do it this time, do you worry that he's going to learn his lesson? We're going to see Trump unleashed during the next debate, and he's kind of insinuated as much.
Well, I think that Clinton gave the clearest answer that she's given. I think she struggled with this during the primary when she was having the same conversation about trade with Sanders, when he was saying he was fully against, and she was saying it's a more nuanced perspective, and we do need to have trade agreements. We are not an isolationist economy. And I think she gave the clearest answer that she has yet, is that we are 5% of the world. We need to trade with 95% of the world. And she will evaluate every trade deal that comes before her by the same standard. Is it good for jobs? Is it good for workers? Is it good for the American economy as a whole? And I think that is the clearest, most concise answer that she's given yet. And I think that she'll stick with that.
But it's not good enough. I can tell you, because when I was Lieutenant Governor of New York State, we saw jobs disappear from New York State, from Syracuse, from Buffalo, from Rochester. And when Hillary Clinton ran for the Senate in New York State, she promised she would bring those jobs back, and she never did. And when she was in the Senate and thereafter, she has supported a lot of trade negotiations, trade deals that are very bad for that part of the country. Upstate New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania.
Betsy, as a Canadian, let me tell you, I hear the message, there were jobs gone from Buffalo and Rochester and Syracuse and the Rust Belt way before there was a NAFTA.
Much worse now. I mean, it looks like...
But he should concentrate on what did NAFTA do to those places. That whole belt all the way west.
Syracuse, China. Left Syracuse,
we can all
went to Mexico.
We can all find one-off examples, but the fact is companies, because of trade and technology, manufacturing companies have been leaving American shores for decades.
It's much worse now.
And we need to focus on an economy of the future that is going forward and on infrastructure.
Like